Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is the Historic Preservation Commission. And today is Monday, August 18th, and we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Beauchamp.
Here.
Commissioner Haley.
Here.
Commissioner Berg. Here. Commissioner Whidden.
Here.
Commissioner Wilt. Here. Do you need help turning that? You need help?
Are we good? Oh, I can still hear it a little bit. Yep. Is it good? Yeah, it sounds better. I can't hear it. Thank you.
Yes. So he has moved on to another job.
Oh. Yeah. So we had our call to order. And we'll do a approval of our agenda for this evening. Yeah, noise?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just making sure it wasn't just me. And it's gone now. Okay. Any changes or anything to add for our agenda? Otherwise, we can have a motion to approve.
I'll second. Oh.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any public comments on items that are not on our agenda this evening? Do we have anyone online? No? Nope. All right. Then our first item is probable cause for 720 Grant Street, and we'll have a staff report.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Jess Daniels, the senior planner, and the presentation here is for probable cause for 720 Grant Street. This property is located at the intersection of Pine Street and Grant Avenue. Just as a reminder, determining probable cause is how the HPC approves grants for historic structure assessments. We use the landmarking criteria in the Louisville Municipal Code to evaluate probable cause. And in this case, the HSA grant will cover up to $7,500 for a residential property. So below are a few images of 720 Grant Street. The left is from the Boulder County Assessor Card from 1948, and then there's a present-day image of the property on the right from this month. The home appears to maintain the original building footprint since the Boulder County Assessor Card, and there's been a few building permit records with some changes to the property, including a new roof in 2019, a patio added in 2009, an addition and unfinished basement in 1999, and then a new fence in 1997. This home isn't listed in the city's architectural inventories, but it is identified as a national folk house architectural type, and it does have a rich social history, which is discussed in the social history report in the packet. So in considering the landmark criteria, it does meet the age as it's 121 years old and constructed in 1904. It has physical integrity by way of maintaining its historic footprint from 1948. It has interesting building character shaped by its folk Victorian style. And it has social significance as it provided housing for community members in Louisville that contributed through mining, social, and cultural activities and other significant historical events. So as the property meets the landmarking criteria, staff recommend finding probable cause and approval of $7,500 toward an HSA. Are there any questions before I pass it off to the applicant for a presentation?
Any questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Okay, and then I'll introduce Mike, the owner of 720 Grant Street, if you want to say a few words.
And if you would just state your name and city of residence for the record.
Yeah. My name is David Finnemore. I live at 720 Grant Avenue. So, yeah, we're here because, you're here because you're all interested in historic preservation enough to be on the commission. So thank you for doing that. Mary and I are here because, well, we've lived in the house since 1983. And over the years, I've thought it would be really nice to, say, have a photo of people who used to live here, or what did the house used to look like. And in all the renovations we've done, I've never found really anything other than a few bobby pins and marbles and scraps of newspaper. And then I started seeing the reports that Gigi was generating. And I thought, I need someone like that to look at to do some research. And about 20 years ago, I went to the Carnegie Library, and I started to do the work. And I wasn't really sure if I was looking in the right place, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So a few months ago, I said, all right, it's time to get serious about it. So here we are. And I'm pleased at the report because it's everything that I discovered and quite a bit more about the history of the house. So anyway, we love the place. The instant we walked up to it in 1983, we said, that's the house we want to live in. Don't know why. You know how that is. You can never explain that. So anyway, that's all. We're happy to be here and participate in this process, and glad that the city and all of you guys value historic preservation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
No?
Thank you.
You don't want to hear stories about the first time I took out a building permit, or how we learned to hammer 16-penny nails because pneumatic nailers hadn't been invented? No, I'll spare you.
All right, and since we don't have anyone else in the public, we'll bring it back for discussion.
I think this one's pretty cut and dry for me, so I would be in favor of it, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It was a real pleasure to see the photos and see how much of the original appearance that the house maintains. So.
Yeah, and I would agree. It's a perfect example of the type of homes that we're trying to preserve and save in the Old Town. So I'm in favor.
Yeah, it definitely meets our criteria of being 50 years or older, having good social history, and architectural integrity. So I'd be in favor of it. Yep. So I want to make a motion.
I will make my first official motion since I've been on this commission this year. So I move for approval of probable cause to be found on 720 Grant Street.
I'll second it.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Whitten,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Beauchamp,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
All right. So staff will be in touch with you as far as next steps and get the HSA where you can learn even more about your home. And then hopefully we'll see you for the next step for landmarking. So yeah, thank you so much for exploring our program and caring about our preservation in our town.
It's certainly you've made it very easy.
That's good to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Wish
you
all
so
the
much.
reviews could be that easy
I
because
know.
theirs is so cut and dry. It's, yes, we want to save this house.
All right. Our next item is a grant update for a proposed approach and next steps for our grant process. And we'll have a staff report. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, so this is a grant update, proposed approach, and next steps. So as you know, the HPF fund was established in 2008, and the purpose of the fund is to incentivize landmarking the city and supplement eligible preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation costs with matching grant funds. So the HPF isn't intended to pay for all the costs, but support financial viability of these projects. So this was an item on the Commission's work plan this year, and the last comprehensive update to the program was in 2019. So I'll just walk through the body of the staff report that was included in the agenda, and then leave an opportunity for Commission discussion at the end. This is really a starting point to start to work through updating the program and those amounts, so we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback today on the methodology and amounts. So the staff report summarizes the work that's already been completed in Q1 and Q2 2024. It wanted to recognize the work that the HBC's already done and past staff. It also looks at an overview of the HPF fund between the current grant program or the last time it was updated, which was in 2019. So it does an analysis of revenue and grant expenditures, proposes new grant amounts based on inflation and construction data, and as well as cost estimates of previous projects within that time frame, 2019 to 2025, and then looking at some line item costs too in those projects that the city has looked at. And then the report also proposes some considerations to update the program in terms of income considerations, equity, and then process improvements. So as I mentioned, a lot has been done already. You had an HPC retreat in January 2024. There was a lot of great ideas had there. Amelia came back in May of last year with a staff report building off those ideas, and there was some great discussion at an HPC meeting in May. There's also some community engagement already conducted. So a subcommittee prepared a survey, a user experience survey, and Amelia had interviewed a number of architects and community members, and that feedback is summarized in, I believe it's attachment 4 in the packet. So this slide is just a brief summary of the 1/8 sales tax revenue for the HPF fund between 2019 and 2025, and then the grant expenditures, and just a brief summary of the context of the fund. So historically, it's been larger than requests received for grants, but as we mentioned at the last meeting in July, we are anticipating multiple commercial grant applications this year, and in 2026, upwards of $1 million in requests. We'll also discuss in a separate item tonight a contract for 1016 Main. That's approximately $1.4 million. So all these requests have the potential to significantly deplete the fund, even though it's been historically large. And then another item we'll discuss tonight is that there is a provision in the current resolution for a contingency emergency reserve fund that can help carve out a baseline amount of funds in the HPF as well, just when considering all these different requests and what grant limits we might want to establish moving forward. So in terms of the analysis in the staff report, there were 10 large, defined as over 40K in matching grant requests, residential projects between 2019 and 2025. There's a table in the report that adjusted the costs and also the grant awards for inflation, 5% inflation. And just as a note, 4 of these projects were over 350K, so there's a few outliers as well affecting the data. And then from these projects, I looked at some line item costs that we typically see for structural work and then restoration rehabilitation work, grouped these into buckets and then could kind of come up with an estimate of what typical structural work costs have been in the past. I know from previous discussions, having potentially a carve-out or additional amount for structural work was a priority of the commission. And then from these two analyses, the first being the total project cost and then looking at the line items, the staff report deduced that a total residential project in Louisville on the higher end might range from $152,000 to $393,000. So quite a range depending on the scope. So difficult to estimate, but I think it provides valuable information on what things cost. The commercial project estimates were a little more difficult to estimate. We've had two projects that have received HPF funding between 2019 and 2025. So the first being 809 Main, and that total project cost was $2.7 million. And then 817 Main, the Waterloo, that was a little bit different, a conservation easement for $300K total cost. And then I brought in a few other projects that might have been eligible for landmarking, but just to look at some different project examples. So one here is 947 Pine Street, the Birdie Bar. That total project cost was around $1.4 million. And then South Street Market was around $3.4 million. So the intent of this slide is to really just show how expensive commercial projects can be and also how they can vary as well, depending on their condition and economic intent. So this might be helpful information, but from that analysis, the average grant amounts that the commission has given has been about $107,000 for those 10 residential properties. Again, there was 4 that were $350,000 total, so that could skew that average a little bit. And then since we've only had 2 commercial, that average is $375,000. But I put the total amounts that we provided in grant funding in brackets. So for 809 Main, it was $628,000, and then for Waterloo, it was $123,000 provided in grant funds. So staff also looked at inflation, and we used Engineering News Record and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics to look at 3 different indexes and estimate inflation between 2019 and 2025. So the construction cost index and building cost index are 2 methods that the Engineering News Record uses to estimate the cost of construction. So these indexes look at labor and material costs over a 20-city average. And then the Consumer Price Index is, of course, inflation of your typical household goods. So after each index, there's an average, the average increase of inflation between 2019 and 2025, and then the graph shows the compounded inflation from that time. So for this analysis, staff decided to use the building cost index. One, because it's a bit higher with the 5% average, so it provides a little bit of wiggle room. And then 2, it most relates to what we're looking at here from a historic preservation perspective, which is structures. So that building cost index is typically used in a structural context. So to come up with some proposed grant increases that were included in the tables in the staff packet, and I'll go through them in this presentation as well. The method was to use a 5% adjusted inflation, so that was applied to each grant category, exempting HSAs, which have already been updated, starting at 2019. And then from that, adding an additional incentive of 10% for each category. And this was just what staff started with, and the numbers seem to come out well in respect to the costs. But there are some alternatives available, which are provided in the last attachment of the report. And so those costs also, or those increases also look at adding 5%, 15%, or 20%. But the staff recommendation is to start with 10% for each category. And then these were calculated through to 2026, which is the expected implementation year. So before I dive into the tables with the updated amounts, I just wanted to chat about the tiered approach. And we really just structured this as a framework to make it easier to kind of understand what staff are proposing. So the first kind of aspect of this is we start at Tier 1, and for both residential and commercial properties in their respective buckets, all landmark properties would be eligible for this base funding. And that would also include, for residential properties only, a new structural grant of $20K. Properties could still use the base funding for structural amounts as well, but that just provides an additional bucket if needed, just to reflect those costs for some properties. So all properties would be eligible for the Tier 1, and then if they met certain criteria, under extraordinary circumstances, they could access another level of funding. And we've proposed to cap extraordinary circumstances, which is different from the current program, and also redefine it a little bit. And the definition would include redefining it to recognize, in particular, some things we'd like to incentivize, such as preserving historic materials that might be cheaper to replace with windows, siding, or doors, and then also structural or building code work, so just providing an extra level for that code or structural work, which might exceed the base funding. And then we're proposing to have a third tier, and this would be new, and this is kind of an attempt to reconcile the flexibility we currently have with extraordinary circumstances, and just for those cases that might be rare or that might be unanticipated, but to provide flexibility if a property meets an exceptional architectural style or social history or has exceptional uniqueness in Louisville. And so this tier would have no caps, but it would be dependent on the HPF fund balance and whether it would be detrimental to the whole fund. So that's kind of the approach for the updated program. And then the following two slides are the tables. So these tables reflect the methodology used, so adding that 5% inflation plus 10% incentive to the existing amounts, and then you get the proposed new amount. So for example, the landmarking incentive would go to $7,700, and it'd be an increase from $2,700. So in looking at the residential grants, the first tier, what every property could be eligible for a matching grant, would be $105,000. And that includes that additional structural grant as well. And then moving through to extraordinary circumstances, if a residential property met that criteria, they could qualify for up to $127,000 total in matching grant funds. So considering the tier 2, and then the landmark incentive as well, that would make it $136,000 that a residential property would be eligible for, not including exceptional circumstances, which is difficult to estimate because we just don't know if that property would be eligible. But again, it'd be rare, case-by-case basis. So I'll jump through to commercial, and we can revisit these tables in the discussion as well. I can jump back. So again, commercial properties would have the same approach. So every landmark commercial property would be eligible for a Tier 1 base amount of $343,000. So looking at what our current matches for commercial, which is $150,000, the jump would be to $232,000 with an increase of $82,000. And then a new commercial construction, such as an addition, that match would jump from $75,000 to $111,000 for a difference of $36,000. It's quite a bit more grant funding, but again, uses the methodology of the 5% inflation, 10% incentive. If a property was eligible for that extraordinary circumstances, Tier 2, we put a cap of $80,000 on it. So a typical property could be eligible, not a typical property, but a property that had the baseline and extraordinary circumstances met that criteria could qualify for up to $500,000. And then again, that exceptional circumstances makes it so that a unique or historically significant property in terms of a social sense or architectural style could access the exceptional circumstances, and there'd be no cap on that. So in addition to these grant limits, some other recommendations staff have are to continue with the loan program. Staff consider it to be working well, so no changes are proposed. Some income considerations are recommended to be added. That includes adding a provision for households that make 120% or below the area median income, eligible for maintenance requests, or a cash match waiver for the matching grant requirement of up to 50%. And this would also align with the housing plan recommendations to support relief for households earning in this income range. The current resolution also has a contingency emergency reserve, and as we'll discuss in another item, this is supposed to be set annually, and so we're recommending to automatically set this reserve at 20% so that the Commission and Council don't have to do this every year. And that would be 20% of the annual operating budget. Staff are also proposing no changes to the time frame to request grants, which is 36 months after landmarking, and then 60 months to request reimbursement. Staff consider this time frame to be working well with the intent of the program, which is to incentivize landmarking. And then the intent of all these recommendations, as well as the tiered approach, is to support equity, which was a concern and a priority that the HPC had suggested earlier in Q1, Q2. So just to summarize, the staff recommendation is to update the grant limits for residential and commercial properties to the amounts in Table 7 and 8, amend the extraordinary circumstances definition to provide more clarity, add an exceptional circumstances new component and related criteria, add the income qualifier for households earning 120% or below AMI for maintenance requests, and a cash match waiver for grants up to 50%, and then establish the contingency fund at 20% of the adjusted annual budget. So if we were to proceed with this approach, staff would draft a new resolution with these recommendations. That would come back to the HPC as early as October so that the HPC could provide a formal recommendation to council. And then staff and the HPC would conduct community outreach to inform residents, realtors, and property owners about the grant program update, and also the upcoming 1/8 sales tax ballot that's anticipated next year, following adoption of any changes. And then staff would report back on implementation and how it's going with this new grant program in mid to late 2026. So some alternatives to this, the grant limits could be updated to an alternative amount, and there are some alternatives presented in the staff report with those increments, but we're also happy to hear any other suggestions, as well as any other direction to be considered by staff as directed by the HPC. So with that, I'll leave it open to you to provide any input on the presented approach.
That was great. Thank you.
Well, I think one thing for me, looking at the BMI or whatever, they got them to 35%. I think that seems realistic, especially if you start to look at the increased revenue that was brought about from 19 to now, which is at about 28%. So, I mean, I don't really see that being out of line or seems to be tracking pretty well with that. Even though it's a little bit more, I think construction has gone up. So I thought that part was pretty good. I do like the extraordinary circumstances portion referencing specifically materials or details that might be lost otherwise. So that was intriguing to me, and trying to put a cap on it. If you go to the other, not extraordinary, but exemplary or whatever.
Exceptional.
Exceptional was the chosen word for the other one. I do find that to get into that realm, as we increase these and you look at our budget, the budget, there's money sitting there, and there's a good amount of money, but that could disappear real quick if you get into that third tier. So I would advise that people kind of stay out of that third tier unless it's really needed, or it seems like it's a break glass in case of emergency type of a precedent setting item. So I'd beware of getting into it too much. Just my initial thought.
Yeah, I would ask you all if we've had a project that you would could see being in that exceptional category that we've reviewed in the past?
I think that's a great question.
Has there been any projects that potentially could have fallen in that category? The exceptional, the tier 3 that's being proposed.
And again, I haven't been on the board long enough to see some of those other commercial ones, so I guess we'd be looking to those that have been on longer for thoughts.
I would imagine that they would likely trend towards commercial properties, although it could also be a Main Street residence. Yeah, which probably trend towards commercial, which are more expensive, as we can see. So again, if we were to adopt the exceptional circumstances, we would, I imagine, be something we want to use sparingly, thoughtfully.
Like the original Waterloo, like that was, like, I would say probably a exceptional property. Do you remember that one at all? Were you here for that?
I was not on the board for
Yeah.
that one, but that's I think the kind of sort of thing we're looking. I believe the question was directed at that, or let's say the church on Pine, or
Right, exactly. That was gonna be
something
my
of that
second
sort.
example, right? Because did you ask for examples, or you asked for
Yeah.
examples? Yeah, I'm sorry. So those are two that I, like, one's residential, but kind of, like, the church is more of a commercial building, but used as residential, but had major structural and all kinds of stuff for that one. And then the Waterloo one was also, like, pretty extensive as far as structurally and taking down a wall and all that kind of stuff. So, but I would say, like, as far as the social history and the architectural, all that, but yeah. But I really like the tiers. I think that just makes it the extraordinary a little more fair, of, like, we understand that not all properties need to have their houses moved or that kind of thing. But it puts a cap on it, and it says, we'll help with extraordinary. But I think just having that cap just protects us from kind of from overspending, but also, like, kind of more subjectively deciding how much we give to all these different houses or properties. And the exceptional, in the report, it seemed like it was pretty, like, the description of, like, what it means seemed pretty laid out as far as, yeah, just the, like, really going into kind of, and this is to your point, but the exceptional architectural style, social history, like, there needs to be a lot of, like, reason why we're going above the cap. So I think, again, that just kind of levels the playing ground as far as making sure that we're not just having this open-ended, because it kind of felt like that for a little bit, where it was just kind of like everything's extraordinary now, and we're just kind of going way above, which I think is why our average grant ended up being like 107,000 instead of where we usually, what the actual grant was for originally. So I think that speaks highly to probably where we are going above and beyond. So I think just saying that cap, like I said, is a great, for me, I think that's great. And having the tiers.
Well, I think just even on the tier 1, having the structural portion of it, which I think was missing and lacking, because
Totally.
typically you were, it seemed like you would be forced to choose from, do I want to do something on my envelope or exterior aesthetic versus structural or something else? And I'm not saying you don't still have those choices, but at least it doesn't make it a full-on as large of a choice there. So I thought that was good as well. I did kind of get the theme. Again, I don't think we've been through a lot of them since I've been on the board with extraordinary circumstances coming through and asking for a lot more. I think there's been 1 or 2 since I've been. But from the conversations we've had, I understood that there were plenty that came in before that seemed like they were on that road. So I do like outlining stuff a little bit better. I do feel a little bit like the exceptional circumstances one seems like it kind of has some criteria, but it doesn't say, it doesn't say break glass in case of emergency enough for me on the description portion of it. I think it just kind of doesn't have enough kind of warning and bite to it in some ways. So, my 2 cents.
So you just like more language restriction
Yeah.
around it. Yeah.
Like,
And
yeah,
I think too, the structural match in tier 1 coupled with the tier 2, because I think most of the extraordinary seem like they were more structural things, like having to move houses or foundations or things like that.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's 42,000 that would be given before they ever even get to exceptional. So I think that also, I agree, like we probably should have some more restriction around tier 3. But I think too, the increasing those tier 1 and 2 amounts will help prevent even needing to get to the tier 3.
well, I like the separation or the addition of the, tier 3, so it's not like you just jumped once, you have to jump twice, and that's just it's a mental hurdle as well. So I think it'll work as intended somewhat, but
Yeah.
a little bit more is needed for me.
Anyone else have thoughts on?
I have a couple of, I don't know if it's thoughts so much as just questions in my mind. I do like the different tiers, and I like that we're getting a little more definition for some of this stuff. Being a recipient of exceptional circumstances for both of the 2 projects I've done here in town, I question, how do we put something that, from what I've learned over the past 5-6 years, that seems like almost every home of a true historic significance in especially Old Town, downtown area, and probably most of the overlay is going to have foundation issues. So I don't think that's exceptional. So I'm a little concerned about, I know the cost of the foundation work from what I had to do, and the amounts of the grants aren't anywhere close to what's required to make it really feasible. Someone has to do it out of a total labor of love. If you're interested in doing it, you're not going to be able to feel like, well, this makes it financially viable. So that's one thought. I'm wondering about the exceptional for things that are really happening all the time. And the other thing in tier 2, extraordinary, and using examples like doing restoration of the historic windows indoors, the potential for $22,300 to be eaten up in windows takes about 4 windows. From the quotes I've had done for mine, 5,000 was an average for a single hung historic window with storm and screen to make it a viable window for today's use. So it's about 3 to 4 times the cost of doing a double paned modern wood fiberglass exterior or metal exterior clad. So I like the idea of what we're doing, and I still feel like we're setting this up for very quickly going, well, that wasn't near enough to do, if what we're really trying to do is to have people consider saving these historic elements to the homes versus using modern, mostly more efficient, energy-wise, products that are out there. 23,000 is not going to be a huge incentive to get people to do that, unless they're saying, oh, well, at least they're giving me something, but it's not going to really help too much.
Can I ask you a question on that, or if you're still going?
No, let's keep the conversation going. I'm good.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're kind of the opinion that with the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3, the tier 2, if truly you're going for, repairing the actual historic windows or something of that sort, that maybe tier 2 should be a little higher at the expense of tier 3, or just higher, period?
Just higher, period. When I look at the total grants available here, the 135,000 or 136,000, except for unlimited exceptional, which I don't like, unlimited. I don't like seeing
the wording
unlimited
either.
to anything. Did you have something? Oh, okay. So that's why I said I didn't have a lot of clear points to make yet. I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind
Yeah.
how this would work, because I still think we're going to have the vast majority of projects come in with this new tier system with with exceptional circumstances because of extreme cost of foundation work.
What,
Okay, and just to, and this is going along with this, just from money perspective, so the grant for structural under tier 1 would be 20, which would be matching would be 40,000, right? Would be the total. And then the extraordinary, could they use extraordinary for more structural if they needed to? I mean, that'd be part of rehabilitation.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of add that.
Right.
So I don't, I think these are all great points, and we might want to think about different amounts and all of that. But I just want to make sure everybody's aware that these, these build on each other,
Right.
right? Like the baseline of $62,000, that can be used for structural work, code compliant upgrades. So it's, usually when you have a grant and it's 62,000, that's, $124,000 worth of work. And that can be code compliant or structural work. And then, oh, by the way, there's another 20,000 if you have foundation work. And oh, by the way, extraordinary circumstances, it's another 22,000. So usually a foundation, based on a little bit of research that we did, was maybe 100,000 plus or minus a
Right.
fair amount, but it's about 100,000, right? So the matching amount would be about 50,000 for the foundation work of a project.
Right.
So we've thought a little bit about that. Again, it doesn't mean these are calibrated exactly the way we want them, but we did really think that tier, like, I know there's been a lot of concern about, trying to treat projects equally. That's why we really thought the tier 2 cap. So if the cap needs to go up a little bit, or we think it's not quite enough, certainly we could do more research or try to explore additional amounts. There's there's a little bit of crystal ball to this. Every project's vastly different. This will be very generous for some projects, Again, as Jess mentioned in the beginning, the intent isn't to pay for every eligible expense. It's to make it a financially feasible project, which, that's kind of the art of trying to figure out what the right amount is.
Right. And so that was and I'll get it back to you, but so that would be basically a total of 40,000 for the structural with a matching plus the 20, and then another 44,000. So that would be a total of $80-ish thousand towards structural. You could use towards structural. So if that makes sense. So, and so I think too, my thought is, we're not paying for everything, but if a house comes and structural issues are the main thing, like I would imagine that would be the primary thing that they would need to do before they could do windows or anything. And so if the city can help in a pretty significant way do that, then there would be some more burden on the owner to do windows or restoration work otherwise, but at least we've significantly helped shore up the house. So anyway, so that was kind of, I just wanted to see how the numbers kind of track with that. So anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, I don't know if I have a lot more there. I was just kind of curious on where,
Yeah, I was more thinking that structural issues, because they're so prevalent, tier 1 maybe should be considering, if you're doing structural work that's necessary to preserve the integrity of this home, why make that exceptional circumstance? Why not, let's say, up to whatever we decided want it to be, instead of structural 20 grand is never going to do it. It's
Right.
maybe that goes up to 50 or 100, wherever you come up with a number, and then keep exceptional for something that truly is exceptional, that, wow, we haven't seen this before. As Josh was saying, be careful with exceptional excessively if it's unlimited money, because it better be something that we've rarely ever seen, and this is not something we're going to expect for the next guy to probably come in and say, oh yeah,
Right.
where we are going to expect the next guy to come in and say, oh yeah, we have 3 walls that are cracked so bad we have to replace the foundation.
But then too, if the owner said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if they wanted to use their 62,000 towards structural, they could also. Structural is just additional. That's an additional, like, we already got our $62,000 matching grant. And oh, by the way, we also have structural issues. So here's another 20,000 for that. So not every house will get the additional structural because they might not have structural issues.
Right. Yeah, like an example might be if you're just doing some basic foundation stabilization, maybe you're within the 62,000, but if you have more structural issues, you can tap into that next amount, I think is the intent.
Right.
So I think the question might be too, is if you think, the amounts are, I guess one way to break this down too is, do you like the structure? Are we comfortable with the structure? Then we could talk about the amounts. And then on the exceptional circumstances, right now we're open-ended, actually, on the extraordinary circumstances. There's no cap right now, interestingly. But one of the things we could put into the criteria that I thought of for exceptional is you could say that the applicant has to demonstrate that without the amount they're asking for, that there won't be financial feasibility of the project. So, just because we say it's open-ended doesn't mean they can ask for everything if they can't demonstrate that but for that money, that the project wouldn't go. So that's a criteria we can add to that third tier to give a little bit of comfort, and then you'd be able to see that financial info.
All right.
I know I've seen elsewhere in different municipalities that they can put something on a structure value, or so it could be up to 50%, max of a structure value or something of that sort. I don't know what all the numbers are. I haven't looked at anything else, but there's other ways to leverage it, cap it, and maximize it too. I would like to say, even in tier 1, if you look at tier 1 subtotal from previous was 55,000, and now we're at 105. That's far more than just 35% by adding the structural portion in there. So we've actually jumped that quite a bit. We've jumped it from 55 to 105, so that's almost 50% additional on top of there. So you see probably a 15% on top of the 35, which I think is a good thing. Now, I hesitate to go too much too fast because, again, there's only so much there for funds and everything else with it. But I think this seems a lot more fair where you're not trying to dip your toe into exceptional hardly ever and extraordinary not, every project as well, which is kind of where we were going. So I think the structure of it, for me, works pretty well. And I get that there's horse trading amongst all the numbers in there to make something work and viable.
Do the numbers work better for you knowing that you can
The
use?
additional in front of structural is key that I was glossing right over, going, okay, so structural is 20 grand.
Right, so it's not only,
Yeah, you can't, as long as it's very clear, and we can make it very clear that maybe you had 30,000 already considered for your foundation work, and that's, as they're getting into it, realizing it's not going to come anywhere close to half of what you need, you say, well, we'll be able to look for another 20 on top of that, in additional structural, and still, if it's still in a tier 1 type of project.
Well, I think what you're saying there, for me, strikes a little bit is additional structural matching. Shouldn't it just be structural matching? Like,
Say that again, please.
the line item in here on tier 1, should it just be structural matching because that's where you start and then you can go grab other money from resident?
well, mine, and
Or did you have to use all of
I
the
read it
62?
as you, that's
Okay.
my understanding, is you start with the 62,000, and if you need more for structural,
Gotcha.
then you can add the 20,000.
I was just looking for
Right,
it as the
in
structural.
the same
item.
way that not everyone's going to add new construction. So that's a new line that you can add to your grant if you decide to do new construction.
Okay, all right, fair
But
enough.
I
Now-
agree that we probably, if we're confused about the wording and like that, like how that all works, we probably need to make it crystal clear in any kind of public verbiage, so.
Yeah, so new construction would obviously require a new foundation, right?
Typically,
So-
unless you're
Right,
cantilever
but that would,
or
yeah,
something.
but that would be separate from
So, so the structural, to be clear, that would be, we'd limit that payment to the foundation of the historic home.
Got it.
So the new construction's just a completely different bucket. And if you do new construction, you actually have to, so we have all these zoning incentives. If you landmark, lot coverage, FAR, and if you take advantage of the new construction loan, you actually have to agree to limit the overall size of the house to kind of restrict it. So we still have those zoning incentives in there. We didn't bring that up for discussion, but if, you know, if you're all still comfortable with that, that's still a condition of that new construction grant.
Right.
So,
So basically, you could spend 82,000 on your foundation if you wanted.
Yes.
You see
That's-
that?
if
Yeah.
That's what was
And then if,
meant by this.
and then
yeah.
if you still needed more, then you could do the additional 22,000.
Yes.
And maybe you wouldn't get to do your windows or whatever, but we would make sure that you're structurally good. And that's the beauty of the HSA is it prioritizes, and structural is always the high priority.
Yeah, nothing
And
else is
so,
gonna
so for that, does that seem reasonable for like structural issues as far as that being a common issue with our houses and any building?
I do think that that's a reasonable amount to think for structural. If we're talking strictly foundation work is structural, not talking roof systems, floor systems. And it's, I struggle with this because I've just so recently gone through it twice. And even the total amount, which is 136, plus who knows what if we left that unlimited. It's not anywhere close to making a project financially viable. So I struggled a bit when Rob was discussing about, well, to get to exceptional, you have to prove that without doing this work, which is an exceptional expense, and I want 500,000 more for this exceptional expense, the project's not gonna be financially viable. Well, neither one of my projects were financially viable. I would have been so much better off to raise both houses, start from scratch, have exactly what you want, not have landmarking, and all the reasons that, you know, are out there about the debate about is it good or not to do. So I'm just more trying to look back at what the goals of our committee are, and when I read through over and over what it is and what we're trying to achieve. And I know we have limited funds, so I don't know. I don't have the answer of how do we use our limited funds. You know, we could very easily next year be hitting the required minimum if we set this required contingency fund. And then whatever projects come from for requests, we're gonna have to wait for a while. But I also don't want only those who are fortunate enough to have the wherewithal to do a project save their homes. So I don't know how you go around that, you know, it's not, there's no answer really that I can think of. It's just a philosophical debate in my own mind of how do you do something that can provide the money. Oh, this is still along the same grounds, but it's kind of a question that came up from the reading prior to tonight's meeting. It didn't come up in this little section, but the idea of the money going directly to the contractors or the suppliers, grant money.
Yeah, we're restricted from doing that. We can't do that to
That's not
avoid the
possible.
tax issue. And then just to be clear too, because we didn't talk about it, the categories of grants too are rehabilitation and restoration, right? So you have to look at the part of the project that's just the exterior work. So a whole home renovation, you know, of course, this is intended to be that portion. So I just want to make sure that was clear, because some of these can be really extensive remodels and things. So we're just looking at that portion. And I think the zoning incentives we found are very valuable to folks as well, in addition to these financial
It is.
incentives. And then I just wanted to mention, we do have one member of the public online, so I don't know when you want to take public comment, if you want to see if they want to speak on this item, just in case it influences your discussion here.
I was going to respond one to you real quick, and then we'll open up for the public. Because I think we had did you have the averages for total cost, total project cost? And that was it 375? Was that, or that was commercial?
yeah,
I'm sorry, it was
so-
107.
107. So this is just based on those 10 largest that we received between 2019, 2025. So
And that
it
was
doesn't,
that was the grant amount or the actual cost of the?
that was the grant amount. Yeah.
I wonder what that.
I think the average cost amount is in the table, which I can pull up if that's helpful in the staff report.
So we often get the total of eligible costs.
Right.
Not, of course, total of the cost of the whole project, but it's limited to the total eligible costs usually, and then you'll see the grant
Right.
amount request coming out of
So I
that.
was looking at that chart, like the most expensive one for the total project cost was
Which page are you on?
on 4, if this is the right one, was $359,000, $359,000.
1045 Front Street.
Yeah, and so if that was the total cost amount, then then what's our total?
100 and
Going back down to so our total would be up to 127,000 if you got everything. And so that's like close to a third of the total project cost, right? If I'm doing that math kind of right.
35%.
Yeah. So, so I think that too, I mean, does that make sense?
But I believe the total project costs that are in this chart,
Yeah.
which I have pretty good information on from 917 Rex and 908 Rex, that's only total project cost for eligible
So
items.
okay.
So I can
Right.
tell you that both of those projects were far
Right.
exceeded these
Right.
amounts, total project.
But
cost.
but our
of these.
program can only pay for eligible,
Right,
right?
right.
And so,
So-
and so then there's that whole piece of, yeah, so I don't,
Right, so,
Yeah.
so I believe with most cases, the total project cost is calculated with the idea of, here's the most important things of the
Right.
things that could be eligible.
right,
And here's the most you could possibly want to, or try to get. So that's your total project cost for the purpose of the
Right.
application.
yeah,
Does that make sense? Am I?
no, totally. So it's not the total project cost, but also that's not what our program
Yeah, and it's
is
not the total
for
project
anyway,
cost
right.
of the historic part of
Right.
it either. It's just the total of
What
what was
was,
probably acceptable to
Yeah.
go in and request money
Right.
for with the grant tiers the way we had it.
right, okay. Let's pause and we'll get our public comment if there's anyone that wants to.
Yeah, so there's one member of the public dialed in, and if they want to speak, if you want to raise your hand right now, *9, I think, since you've called in. We'll give you a second to see if you want to speak on this item. So they're not raising their hand immediately here, but if they raise their
That's
hand,
great.
I'll
Just keep an
monitor
eye
it for a
out.
little bit, and if they raise their hand, I'll let you know.
That's good.
Are we looking to try to set new numbers right now, or just decide if we agree with the idea of 3 tiers? And
So I think we'd like to know where the commission sits as a whole, generally on the numbers. If you want to give us direction tonight, if there's a majority or consensus who want to change some of the numbers, if you're comfortable with the structure. Alternatively, we can kind of keep the numbers as a placeholder, and when we come back with the adoption of the resolution, we could bring more information, and you can play with the numbers then. I think, again, if you like the structure, you can bump up the structural by 10 grand or not, depending on, what kind of information we bring at the adoption meeting for the resolution.
But one question I have, I mean, I think there is a pretty significant jump between 55,000 and 127,300. That's a big difference in what people will have access to for the majority of projects that come in front of us. So that's not insignificant compared to where we are now. My one question about the tier 3 exceptional circumstances versus the tier 2 extraordinary circumstances is projects where the, like residential projects where the property owner has limited means. And it maybe not meet these new proposed exceptional circumstances criteria, but they truly need more help to save a property. Like what provision is there for circumstances like that?
Well, we did propose the income qualifier as well. So if their household income was 120% or below, they could waive our match requirement, or they could also use grant funds or the loan for maintenance requests as well. So that's what we have currently. But if there's other suggestions, happy to hear those too.
If someone has like sort of what you were referencing in terms of like major structural work, or like a house is really in poor condition, and they would not be able to save, truly would not be
Right.
able to save the property.
So I think when we want to look at, so here's the philosophy on
Yeah.
that. Just, you may or may not agree as a group, but, if you've got to put $300,000 to save a house foundation, and that's the only way they can afford it, if it's not a really unique property, maybe we shouldn't be spending the money. I know we don't like to say no, but if it's, that's the whole point, is we can't do this on every single house. So unless it is that exceptional category where it's really unique socially or historically or architecturally, then it might be worth throwing $300,000 into the foundation. But if not, we might just have to say, hey, that one, we're just going to have to let go if that's not financially viable. So that's hard to do sometimes.
Do we state that to get to exceptional circumstances that the property has to have exceptional significance? Is that part of,
So
otherwise
that
you don't
third,
get
you're
to-
talking about the third tier
Yes.
criteria. Do you want to go over the third tier criteria? Yeah.
Yep, so the third tier, I put it in the staff report. The third tier, oh, sorry, I'm just looking for the slide.
Pretty sure it was in there someplace, but that was a
It's
lot of
in-
reading to
it's
do.
like page 10 to 11.
So the criteria would be
Yeah, there we go.
exceptional architectural style or social history and exceptional uniqueness and availability of funds in the HPF.
How I'm reading that, reading the subtext of that is they're almost like singularly unique. And a lot of commercial properties will probably have an easier time, but some residential properties might meet that as well. Like they're a church, or they're the only, one of 3 brick bungalows left in the city. Maybe not singularly, but near singularly, those are the things that I'm expecting we'd say that's exceptional. Like that it needs to really be one of a kind or one of 3 left in the city is the idea.
Right.
And, there's probably different ways to say it, but.
That helps me a lot too with thinking about not having every project come to us saying it's exceptional. So that's a good clarifying point, that you have to
Right.
have these other criteria met to get to there. I still think we shouldn't have unlimited though.
It already is, though. It's like more unlimited now than what this is proposing. So this is, to me at least, the way I read it is significantly more constrained. Like more generous to a point and then more constrained.
Right, I agree.
One other point, since we're talking about people who may need the exceptional rules because of income levels not being able to support what they need to do to save their property, I would like to see somehow in the language that it's not just income based on the annual income base, because there are many people who live off of assets that aren't income-based, that I wouldn't want to see that people get to get around the 50% match if you're sitting on millions of dollars and you don't have income because you're a trust fund person that happens to have these huge dollars of reserve, but you don't have any income because you're not working right now. So somehow if that could be incorporated into the language, that there would also have to be some evidence of no other resources available that could be used other than income.
That's a good point.
I've seen that with other deed restricted programs in other communities, that it's not just income.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Our other person didn't raise hands?
No, our online guest has not raised their hand, so
We
I think
took too
we can
long to
move
get
on. Yeah. Again, if they do want to say something, please raise your hand, and we'll just keep moving forward.
And I guess one, how does everyone else, what do they think about the amounts? Sounds like you feel like it's pretty,
I think it's a big jump up.
Reasonable.
I mean, in like arithmetic wise, it's a significant jump from where we were at. So.
Jess, could you explain real quick how that percentage, I know it was a 5% and a 10%, is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, so the purpose of that was to start at inflation, which was 5%, which seemed a little low. So we played with additional numbers, adding on top of that, accounting for inflation. And also because costs are a bit higher here than maybe the national average, which is what those numbers were based off of. So in the attachment in the report, there's a chart for each grant type. And from that 5% inflation, we added 5%, 10%, which was the recommendation, 15%, and 20% as well. I can call up those charts if that's helpful to look at as well.
Do you understand how?
I don't know if I quite got.
Can I ask a question that's sort of related to that? Like, how long are you anticipating that these numbers are going to be good for?
That's a great question, and we talked about this. We were proposing that these 2026 limits be implemented until the end of the program, 2028. And moving forward, we would update them every 3 years.
When you factored for inflation and stuff, you did it with that timeline in mind so that it gets us through the end of that?
We discussed that, and we did not.
That's another way to do it. If you feel like these seem low, and, we could look at inflation, keep compounding for another 3 years and bump everything up a little bit. It would really affect the baseline numbers. We could just adjust for inflation every year. I think a potential negative side effect of that is people just keep waiting and waiting for it to go up and up.
Right.
So we thought having a 3-year turnover, but if we wanted to, again, if these seem low and you're worried they'll seem low in the next 2 years and 3 years, then maybe we just compound that up and bump these numbers up a little bit. Again, it's this balance because we do have limited funds and people will take advantage of, as they should probably, every dollar that they can on eligible expenses, because we're very generous about eligible expenses, to be honest. Versus a typical historic preservation program, they really try to limit that to restoration and rehabilitation of the historic elements. We're very, very generous when it comes to code upgrades, structural upgrades. I think that's something where we're very unique because we have the money.
I would say the increase right now of just being based off of this year is probably my preference, just to not make the math that much more difficult every year when something comes back around, and readdressing every 3 years seems reasonable to me. I do look at, again, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some commercial stuff coming through, and I'm pretty sure that 3.2 or whatever we have in there right now, I'd have to look back at the number, they're going to leverage against that pretty hard. So it could disappear quicker than you think. And especially having to keep 20% in a coffer and everything else too, so.
Right.
I think that in my opinion, this is addressed, at least inflation, it's addressed, 2019 versus now. I think it's added a couple other stipulations, which are items that kept coming up and being sticking points. And I think it also does give another, kitty that you could go after if you really wanted to in the tier 2, and then tier 3 being like, prove to me why, and really prove it.
And while we have had recently some pretty large projects, both residential and commercial, we also have had a fair number of smaller projects, especially, residential mainly, but where these numbers would be very helpful and generous. People are replacing, structural pieces on the facade, materials, things like that, where these can make a big difference. I like the income qualifier. I think that's really important to have in there. So I'm glad to see it in there. And I do concur with Talbot regarding other assets and including that information to be included when it's considered. So the numbers, as long as they're 3 years, look generally pretty good to me. Any longer than that would not work so well.
Did you still have questions about the 5 and 10?
No, I'm
Okay.
I'm clear, yeah. Thank you.
So it sounds like for the most part, we're probably okay with the numbers for the next 3 years, kind of this,
Yeah.
except for maybe Talbot. What do you think? Just give all the money away.
I'll smile a lot more if we get rid of unlimited.
Right. Well, and that can be the next thing. I think the first thing is just making sure that the numbers, because that would be a big conversation of like, how do we decide how much and da da da. So I think as long as we're good with the numbers in tier 1 and 2,
Yeah.
and knowing that that can go to, like, there's a lot of flexibility in how you prioritize the use of that money, as far as structural obviously being the most expensive. Then we can talk about tier 3, which I think we all, at least a few of us have said, like, there should be some restriction or at least more teeth or whatever in that format. So I guess what does that look like? Because I think that was that subjective, like, open-ended ability for the commission to just do above and beyond. And so how do we keep that, and maybe it's not a priority, maybe we don't want to have that open-ended at all. But I think in past commissions, they did want to. I mean, there's definitely some projects that we've spent a lot of money on. And so how do we find that magic number? I think has always been the hard part. And then what restriction, or if there's any verbal restrictions we can give to really nail it down as far as limiting who has access to it.
I wonder if you're, again, I'm just thinking out loud a little bit here. So I'm wondering if you come in for any of those exceptional funds, that we have a history of how many projects have ever exceeded a certain amount and what the exceptional was on those, or at least we start tracking that back to a certain date. And then you can really put a percentage to, on this one we gave 10% over what would be extraordinary right now. Does this feel in the same range? That's the only way I can make the math work in my head anyways right now, is just having some other lever or something else to compare it to.
Right.
And I'd probably be trying to ask that sort of question and figure out what it would be on my own anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, just otherwise just grabbing numbers out of the air that are beyond that, it just has no foundation for me.
No.
I don't have any way to relate it to anything else of, is it this important or that important? I don't know the right answer. That was just,
Yeah, I have no
kind of
idea.
open-ended there, sorry.
Yeah.
We're all just like thinking, I mean, I was almost thinking like a percentage of the total cost. I mean, like exceptional would be, but that doesn't, I have no idea.
Yeah, you could do that, but again, as Josh is saying,
It doesn't.
is that just throwing a limit on it that doesn't have any merit? I mean,
Right,
where's the
exactly.
metrics to prove that if you said, all right, you could get an additional 50% above tier 1 and tier 2 if you prove everything
Right.
is eligible for tier 3, but why 50%? You know, where would that number come
Yeah.
from? So we'd have to have some basis for throwing a number, so
Right.
maybe I just bite my tongue and accept unlimited, and we keep it subjective and And the applicant realizes it's subjective to a lot of criteria being met, and it's going to be a true exceptional experience to go beyond tier 2 once we instate these other tiers.
Right.
And I don't want you to feel like you have to come up with the criteria tonight, too.
Okay.
I think, you know, we could think about it between now and October, when we hope to bring it back. You'll have time to think, you know, when I sleep on things, I have great ideas 2 or 3 days later. So you'll have time to think about things, you know, when we bring it back. We'll have more for you to react to. So if you have good ideas now, let us know, but don't feel like you have to come up with the final criteria tonight.
Okay. Yeah, so everyone get some good sleep this week and come up with some ideas. But yeah, I think that's what kind of got us here in the first place is, I mean, we've always had the extraordinary circumstance, but for whatever reason, it's come up more, and probably because of inflation and all the different things, but it's come up more recently where we've really had to address it. And so now we see like, oh, if you open that up and make it available more often, then people continue to try to. So anyway, I think it is worth figuring out I don't know, some kind of, even if it's just really emphasizing the rarity that it's used.
Right.
This is very, it's
Exactly.
not exceptional like, oh, cool, this is a great project. It's exceptional like we hardly ever, ever, ever do it. It's the great exception. So,
And I do like that it has included in there the availability of funding, you know, especially in the more
Right.
near future, when that might be a real issue. There might be something that truly is exceptional and truly costly, but not viable financially. And so applicants will need to know that information going in.
all right.
And if we did end up to the point where we were targeting certain residences, commercial buildings, whatever, if it was in the targeted mapped items, maybe that's an item where, you know, you feel like you could get into the exceptional circumstances more easily, but you'd still have to prove it pretty hard.
Right.
You know, there's other items that could come in there as layers to the information. I don't know.
Sure. So I think we'll table that and continue to think about what that looks like as far as the exceptional. And then, and commercial is kind of the same. Everyone's good with the numbers and specifics on commercial. And obviously they would have, I mean, in some ways, the commercial I would almost think would have more chance of falling into the exceptional because we have fewer commercial buildings in the first place. So they're all a little bit more exceptional because they have high social and architectural values. So that's one thing we might run up against too, is the larger projects end up being possibly having more exceptional work to be done. But we can figure that out. So I think that's everything about the actual, keep the numbers same, figure out the, and so then the income consideration, the loan program, does anyone have any changes? How many loans have we actually done? Like not,
We have 2 active loans. We've done 3 total.
okay.
When we looked at the user experience surveys, some of the feedback there was that applicants aren't, or people who come in front of the commission aren't always aware of the loan program. So that's worth considering, I think.
Yeah, we can incorporate that into our community outreach and let more people know about that aspect of the program.
And I think when we get into the extraordinary, when there is above and beyond, like really promoting that we do have a loan and it has a lower interest rate and all that kind of stuff. So that is something, a way that we can promote the loan a little bit more. And then,
Can I ask one question?
sure.
On the loan program, you might have the most information on this. How do we qualify someone for a loan?
Yeah, we have a contract
process.
with Impact Development Fund that does the underwriting for us. So they actually apply through Impact Development Fund, and then they will give the city the qualifying documents, and then somebody at the city, finance director, is probably who would do it, would say, yes, this is a
Whether it
a
would
loan that
meet-
we're willing to give. It's very similar to a bank. You know, it's kind of a risk analysis
Okay,
based
we're
on
good.
the underwriting.
That's all I
Yep.
wanted to hear. And then, is that loan, are the proceeds from the loan taken from the HPF, or is it taken from general fund, or where?
Yeah, it comes out of the HPF.
HPF, okay.
And then just gets paid back into that.
Right. And the loan doesn't have a cap.
Right.
Right now, and, but it has to be for qualifying expenses. And we have encouraged people, they can use that for their 50% match on the grant if they would like. So we have, I've never seen anybody, well, I don't know if that nobody's ever done it, but I think that's an option as well for people who maybe don't have a lot of cash at hand but can
Right.
carry the loan.
Right.
But do we have a qualifier that to do the loan, they have to have prove that they're in that 120 or lower?
No,
Anyone can
anybody
use the
can do the
loan.
loan.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so there again, there goes our
money.
money really quickly if
Yeah.
somebody really understands that program.
Well,
that-
it's all contingent on our fund too. So
Yeah.
if we can't give a loan because our funds are
Depleted.
out, yeah, if we're below that 20% or whatever, then they couldn't get a loan.
Yeah.
But
And if someone meets all the other criteria and their loan amount or grant request amount because of the new tiers and the high level, can we just say, look, we just feel like that's going to take too much of the overall amount of the fund. We're not willing to
Yeah,
give that.
you're not obligated to issue the maximum grant request in any case at all. I think that's something that has happened a lot, is it's really just, and there's no reason why an applicant wouldn't come in and say, here's all my qualifying expenses, I'm gonna ask for all of it, and oh, by the way, I'm gonna try to argue extraordinary circumstances because of the subjectivity of it and try to maximize that. I think most people will do that, and I think it's a question of then, you know, is it necessary to make the project viable or not? It's a hard position to be in as the commission with our very, very unique incentive program that we have.
Because then one could also, going on with your example, could say, oh, and by the way,
Yeah.
I want to use the loan program.
They could, and I think we'd be happy if that led to a landmark, because then we're actually getting that money back over time with a little bit of interest. You know, as long as the fund balance stays healthy, I think the loan program could really help, you know, move the program forward. Honestly, if we were to, you know, if the tax ends in 3 years and for some reason it's not renewed, we could be looking at going to an all loan program, for example, just to try to keep that fund
right.
active and maybe really minimize the grants. We don't know where we'll be 4 years from now.
All right.
And as it is now, the loan program is not exclusive of grants. One can get grants and
Yep.
also,
Get a loan for
Get a
the
loan
matching
to
amount,
pay.
yep. Yeah, or if they don't, if you decide, well, we're gonna not give grants past this. So for example, if somebody has $300,000 of, so here's the thing, right? Somebody actually has $350,000 of eligible expenses and you cap the grant at 127, so it pays for 245 or whatever it was, if I'm getting those numbers right. They can still get a loan, to a very, very low interest loan
Right.
to get to that 350,000 of eligible expenses. So that's a good point to keep in mind, that you don't have to use the loan to pay your match. You can use it to pay for all of your eligible expenses in your project.
Right.
Do we ever suggest that to people? It's
Yes.
say that again?
It's like a financial aid package.
I know.
You know?
We absolutely do, you know, and so, yeah, I have personally recommended that to multiple potential and actual grant applicants, whether they've done it or not. Yeah,
And we don't mention it in meetings very often, but I think in the side conversations, hopefully it comes up as needed. So, yeah.
So just for reference, the inflation-adjusted matching grant for 809 Main, so the old Waterloo one, was 628, so that'd be 25% greater than the maximum amount they'd be able to apply for right now into the exceptional circumstances item. So just for a number or a percentage that goes with that property in particular.
And it's also possible that they still would have done the project for the capped amount.
Yep,
We don't know, we don't know, but they asked for everything that was eligible.
yep. And I wasn't part of that one, just, I know that's a larger expenditure
Yeah,
that we've had.
I think the benefit of having the cap is you can kind of hold the line a little easier when somebody's always asking for the maximum eligible, even if it goes beyond that cap.
Right. Yeah. All right, so that was the loan and then income considerations. So, does anyone not think this is a good idea? What?
We should have talked about contingency fund.
I was gonna work my way down. Where's that? Oh, yeah, I was just gonna do this real quick. I was just following her little, a contingency will be after. So the income consideration, and I think it is good if we are aligning with the city council recommendation and just an overall city. And so that would be something that would be obviously outside the meeting, it would be with staff as far as eligibility and all that, right? We wouldn't discuss eligibility in the meeting for the match.
So I think that, it's part of your consideration because it could significantly affect the balance
Right.
of the fund. So we hadn't really contemplated the fact that, I think it would have to be part of the public meeting. I mean, you don't have to focus on it significantly, but I think
far
we
as,
would want
like,
it to be.
Proof, like the proof would
No,
already
yeah, we
be
would,
done
we
ahead
would,
of time
we would
to say
qualify
that-
that.
okay,
Yes, yes. Yeah,
qualifications,
yeah.
right.
We would go through the qualification
And then we would
process,
just
make sure that their
agree.
income and assets, and I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure the affordable housing folks
Yeah,
probably
they
have a
can-
way to do that.
Give you all that
Yeah.
information.
And so basically come to us as far as like.
We'll say
this
they qualify or
applicant
don't
qualifies.
qualify. That'll be all you would
Yeah.
need to know.
You
Yeah.
can't say any more than that.
Right. And then, yeah. So does anyone not want or have any changes to that? Is everyone good with staff pursuing that further?
I think that's good.
Okay.
I like it.
All right, and then the contingency emergency reserve. So that's making sure that we always have 20%.
And I would say we're not asking you to weigh in on the 20%. That'll be a separate discussion. But whatever we set it at, we're recommending that it just automatically is set at that amount rather than having to relook at it every year.
Okay, so not necessarily 20%, you
Yeah,
just do that
we'll
in
talk
there
about
as
that as a separate agenda item and see
Okay.
what percentage
Okay.
or methodology you want to land on.
Okay.
Yep.
And then so we'll table that, correct?
Yeah, we'll table the 20% amount, but if you're okay with us just
Yeah.
auto renewing it, I mean, honestly, that's been in our resolution for years and years and years. I don't think we've ever set the minimum amount before. but now,
Right.
just didn't hit our radar, unfortunately, but it's a good thing to talk about now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and then the next is currently you have 36 months to request grants and then 60 months to do reimbursements. So, and it doesn't seem like that's been an issue with applicants as far as running out of time, because they could always come back after that if they really wanted to, or no? Is that a hard no?
So on the 36 months, so we say, we do have kind of an extraordinary circumstance, but the idea is that this incentivizes landmarking. It's
Right.
not meant to fund property maintenance for decades or,
Right.
So the idea is that, yeah, we want to incentivize people to landmark, but once you're landmarked, honestly, unless they have financial issues, we expect them to maintain the historic part of the house without city support.
Right.
How would that apply to somebody that purchases a landmarked home?
So if you
10,
purchase it
16.
within that 36 months, you can come in for an eligible grant. But after that, you wouldn't be able to. It runs with the land, but you still have the same 36-month limit. So we don't want somebody purchasing the home, years and years and years later, and then, you know, necessarily saying they need grants. You know, they purchased it knowing what the restriction was on the landmarking.
Okay.
Again, that's why we put the income qualified, though, because if somebody does acquire the house and they are, you know, they don't have the financial means, we may want to support them with the also maintenance items, and that's maintaining the historic elements. So income qualified may make sense, but not for just everybody to come back 5, 6, 8 years later.
And then how do we ensure that we have money in the coffers if one's got 5 years to request reimbursement? So if we're keeping 20%, then all of a sudden a couple of projects who have been sitting idle
Yeah.
kick in and say, I'm on my money now, here's my.
Yeah, it would have to be 20% of unencumbered funds, so
do
we would
encumber a certain amount of
encumber them,
fund
yep,
Whenever we have, okay.
yeah.
So I'm still thinking about 1016 Main Street. City purchases it and landmarks it. Will they landmark it immediately, or will they wait until they have a buyer so that that buyer then has the 3 years? I mean, I can't see it sitting, but you could potentially landmark it and then it sits for a year before it sells, and you've only got 2 years to work with.
Right. So there's a few ways to deal with that. I think none of this is set in stone. By any city council action, we can change that time frame despite the resolution. So I would imagine that if we enter into a contract and it takes a year and a half to sell that property, we could just put in the agreement with the new buyer that they get 36 months after they, you know, that would override this resolution.
Okay.
Yep.
What do we need now?
I know.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've always felt like the 36-month is more restrictive, because if I wanted to landmark my house, but I was like, my house doesn't need anything like major right now, but it might in 5 years, and I would wait 5 years to do it. Like, it feels to me like it might be, could be like prohibitive, or like, I'll just wait until I actually need to do stuff and want to take care of the grants or take advantage of the grants, because I'm not ready yet and my house is fine. And so I'm just going to wait until,
Yeah.
so that's like the flip side of it. I'm always like, I feel like it kind of takes out some of the like good-hearted, like, I just want to landmark for the sake of landmarking, because then if I do that, then I lose out. If I have a house that's in great condition in general, then I lose out on that potential later down the road. So I understand from like
Yeah.
but I mean, that's always been kind of my like.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense if we know we're going to have a $5
Right.
million balance in the
Right,
fund
forever.
in perpetuity.
Right.
But if we have somebody landmark with the expectation that 5 years from now, they're going to have funds available, they may not.
Right.
I mean, honestly,
You just never know.
you know,
Yeah.
our sales tax ends in 2028. If it doesn't
Right.
get renewed, you know, we don't want to overpromise that
Right.
people are going to have grant funds available 5 years from now.
Right. I think it makes sense now,
Yeah.
as far as the timeline, but there's definitely, I'm sure people are like, yeah, I think I'll just wait until I can't see myself doing anything in 36 months, so I'll just wait, so.
Yeah, it depends on what they want to do. I mean, if they're relying on it to make, you know, plumbing upgrades to their home, you know, again, I think primarily these monies are really meant to maintain the historic elements of the
Right.
home. You know, and, you know, there are, the language says code upgrades. So we've extended that pretty far to say, you know, like, none of these homes have any code upgrades, or it says code upgrades, or I forget the exact language, or things that need to make it a viable home, basically. So there's always some, you know, a lot of these foundations, honestly, could last another 100 years if you keep them dry, right? But to modernize the foundation, and some people want to put basements in and things like that, and we're actually paying for those types of things to make them modern homes, which is a big, big incentive, but it's a big expense as well.
All right.
So how do we not disincentivize someone from landmarking? Because you're bringing up a good point I hadn't thought about. If someone is, we've convinced them at our discussions that they really should landmark this property, and they're thinking, well, we don't know, we might, we're a young family, we might be moving away and have to sell in 4 or 5 years. And if we do that, then it's a disincentive to the new buyer because it's already been landmarked and needs a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll solve all of these scenarios and issues, because I think that'll discourage some issues. To me, it's more of a fund management issue. Like, I think all these things make sense, and it would be amazing to be able to really, provide a strong incentive for someone who's really thinking that far ahead. But I think it would be, the further we put that out, I feel the harder it is to responsibly manage the fund and not overpromise. Because if we get 10 landmarks this year and none of them want to use the fund for 5 years, I mean, we're not encumbering the fund for those people, and then that would kind of seem disingenuous to them if they think they have those funds available past the 36 months.
And I guess too, like if it does become a problem, or if it had been a problem, we would have known through staff. Like that would have been something that came up. So obviously it's working okay. And who knows if there's people that aren't because of like the restrictions I said, but so far it's working. So, and maybe in 3 years, if we get the tax renewed, we can revisit it and it'll be great. All right. And then, yeah, so that's everything. So it sounds like the only kind of glaring thing, it's not even glaring, but just trying to figure out the restrictions on exceptional, I would say. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
We'll
Thank you
sleep
so
on
much
it.
for the great discussion and the feedback. So we'll plan to bring back a draft resolution to you in October and have some language around exceptional circumstances as well.
All right, and then our next option, item is the contingency emergency reserve funds. So,
Okay, so this, we've chatted about this in the previous item. They're definitely interrelated, but Section 3 of our current resolution, number 17, Series 2019, requires the establishment of an annual contingency emergency reserve fund. As Rob mentioned, we haven't been doing this in the past, to our knowledge. These reserve funds could only be accessed if the HPC and City Council determine that urgent action is needed to prevent damage, significant damage to the historic fabric or character of Louisville. So staff spoke with the finance department, and we also looked at the first, I guess, original recommendation of the resolution, which was in the first year to establish a reserve of 20% of the annual operating budget. And this 20% is consistent with what other departments are doing as well. So the staff recommendation is 20%, which for this year works out to approximately $202,000. And we've provided a draft resolution for you, but you may, of course, amend this to a different amount if that's desired. So I'll open it up to you for discussion.
So this is a separate fund. It would be taken out of our general fund and set aside as a contingency fund. Is that right?
It would be within the HPF fund.
Saying you couldn't withdraw, you couldn't encumber the fund below this point
Okay.
without meeting that exception, that criteria. So if we really went crazy with the grants and the loans, we couldn't draw down below that for all expenses in the Historic Preservation Fund. No.
but, I guess like the purchase of 1016 Main and then some possible,
Commercial.
yeah, I just wonder like how close we could potentially be.
I think it was mentioned in the city council meeting, it could be below $1 million.
Yeah. You know, we're trying to provide worst case scenarios too. You know, I think that, and it depends on how things stack up and how, you know, so I think the idea as I was looking at it was if we were very, very successful, which would be a really great thing to spend this money, we'd probably have a lot of great landmarks. How much do you feel like you need until, you know, assuming the tax is still there to keep, you know, we're getting about $1 million a year. So if we spend all this money, we're getting about $1 million a year, but you don't want to miss out on something. You know, that's kind of the intent, which is a weird thing to think about. I don't know if we'd ever be in that situation until, well, I don't know if we'd ever be in that situation in the foreseeable future. So if you wanted to do, for example, like if you wanted to do a really big commercial project, like you went through all your funds and you wanted to have contingency, like commercial projects are 500,000, this wouldn't cover that. So if you feel like you want to have enough to do a big commercial project, you might want to say it's 50% of annual instead of 20% or something.
What is the reasoning behind other departments utilizing the 20%?
So I think some of them were as low as 10%, but it really depended on if they had capital to maintain. So one example was the rec center. They had a higher operating budget just because of the potential for that building to need maintenance. So, I mean, 20% we're looking at structures with this fund, which is why we proposed that amount. And just because the resolution set that amount in the first year just to maintain some consistency.
There's no apples to apples reason for doing it this way. We were just kind of fishing with our finance department of what would be some methodology. I don't think we have anything similar to this in the city as far as how to set a minimum. So I think whatever the philosophically what you want to achieve might drive it more than anything else.
I could get on board with it somewhat, but I mean, if you're doing, again, you're taking out your stick and putting numbers in the dirt for rough cowboy math, you're looking at, you know, 25% would give you essentially 2 people coming in up to tier 2 for residential, or half of what the commercial one would be as far as a number. I could see that being a little bit higher if I'm just trying to, again, find some reasoning in my head and find a way to do it. I would lean towards maybe like 25%, get it up more towards 250. Because you can still break into it, but it's really got to be a reason again. And this is even probably bigger than the tier 3 reason.
And the sources of income for the HPF are limited to the sales and use tax revenues and any contributions that donations or something that comes in. There's no way that general funds could be put into this if that circumstance came where there's something extraordinary came and we were down to.
That's a good point. I think if you set it at 20% and something extraordinary came, there'd be a, you know, it's a city council decision if they want to tap into their general fund or capital fund even potentially to acquire something or provide a grant.
Do we have donations that go into this?
I'm not aware that we've had any.
I think there's language in there about that was
Yeah,
one
it could.
potential way for funding to come into it. I was trying to remember all the things. And I mean, if we know that we do have a potential, if there's something that as a community, we all know that we really want to do it, but oh yeah, we're going to fall a couple $100,000 short because we had such a great year, that potentially we could.
I mean, theoretically, you could borrow
Well, right.
from one of our other funds and pay it back as you
Right, as
rebuild the balance.
funds build.
So that's a good argument to keep it on the lower side.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only downside is there's not a whole lot you can do in our field with 200,000. So as far as like buying property or like something that came up,
Mhm.
so we'd have to be creative if something came but then too, I'm like, worst case scenario, like, what are the chances of that actually, of us getting that low? But maybe next year we're gonna find out.
I think somebody's going to test you sooner or later.
I know, we're on the cusp of testing it, but.
And I think it might be helpful moving forward if, if we have an active year or so for staff to continually update us on the, the balance of the fund, which we get sometimes, yearly, but not every meeting. But if we have a very active year, it'd be very helpful to have that information, to know where we are sitting with whatever dollar amount that reserve is.
I think we're at 3.8 approximately, 3.8 million. There might be, I don't know if that accounts for all the encumbered funds. Yeah. But we don't have, I don't think we have a lot of encumbered funds right now either, but I don't have the exact number.
And that's already including the sales and use tax that have been put into the budget for 2025.
That doesn't take us to the end of the year. That's not a projection to the end of the year. I think
Okay.
that's actually current.
So it does.
So it will probably keep going
Increase
up to
more.
the end of the
Okay.
year, yeah.
I think fine with, I mean, 25%, 30%, or 40%, I mean, like, I don't know. So if you're,
I mean, I was just putting it out there as a way I would get to a number. I have to go with the decision of the board. If they wanted to keep it at 20%,
Yeah.
I would go with it. I was just saying, my gut feel would have been 25.
I didn't think about this, but I'm gonna, when we were talking about operating budget, I think when Jess was working on this with the finance, is that our operating budget is dependent on how much we are estimating we're gonna pay out of the grant fund at any time. So if we say we're gonna pay $1 million out of our grant fund that year, that operating budget bumps up. So the operating budget is about $1 million right now. If we say we're gonna do another $1 million of grant next year, that would bump up really high. So I would just recommend actually that we change this to do a percentage of revenue.
Yes.
So we have about $1
That's
million.
how I agree.
So whether we pick 20, 25, or
Yep.
30%, we're gonna be in the same ballpark, and I'd rather do it by revenue than operating budget.
Yeah, that does make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
That's how I was perceiving it in my brain, so, yeah.
Much better.
Yeah.
and that'll make it a little more consistent with
Right.
income versus spending. That's good. So do we want to do it 25% then?
That's the number I would throw out, but
Sounds fair. 25% of the, okay.
I think I'd like to see it a little bit higher, just considering what some of the projects cost. If we have even several smaller projects, it'd be nice to be able to fund things.
And so that number there is our the 2,000 or 202 is the operating budget, not the percentage of our
Revenue.
fund. Is that what you're
Right, but they're actually
They're
very
actually pretty
similar
close.
numbers. Yeah.
that's why my brain went to
For now, yeah.
the projected 1 million
Right.
for this year.
And we're talking of unencumbered funds, not funds.
Their tax revenue for the year.
So, yeah, this would be annual tax revenue per year, regardless of if it's encumbered or not. Yep.
Then 25% sounds good.
Like,
Yeah, 25% of the. The income, the tax revenue. Is that what
Tax,
you're
yeah,
saying?
yearly tax revenue.
All right.
So I think we wanted a motion and a formal recommendation to city council on that, correct? Yep.
I'll make a motion to change the number to be 25% of the annual tax revenue.
I think total revenue, not tax revenue.
Yep. And can we, just to be really clear, could we say, like the 25% of the tax revenue of the preceding year? Because we won't know what the tax
I
revenue
was
is of
thinking that
that
same
year.
thing.
Okay.
So I'll retract that. I will make a motion to make the reserve contingency fund 25% of the previous year's tax revenue.
I would second that motion.
We'll do a roll call, please.
All right. Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Beauchamp,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilt.
Yes.
Great.
Do you want me to go over this one since I've?
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So as I think you've probably all heard, the city council, I think you're familiar with this property. You put a demolition stay that actually ended at the beginning of, actually, I think it was September is when the demolition stay would end. But after that time, city staff did engage with the homeowners and talk to them again about our grant program and whether they wanted to landmark. They still weren't interested in that, but they were interested in selling the property to the city. So we worked with city council on whether that was something of interest using the Historic Preservation Fund. The property owner bought the property about 3 years ago for a little over 1.3 million. They were willing to sell it to the city for 1.4. The idea is that we would then sell the property after landmarking it. We certainly could, our resolution allows us to use it for any public use or resell it and recoup money into the Historic Preservation Fund. So our city council is interested in purchasing it, selling it, recouping the money. City council did take a formal action to enter into a contract to purchase the property, which would, with a closing date of September 30th. So we did go in a little bit weird order, just trying to keep things moving quickly with the homeowner. But we do want to check in with Historic Preservation Commission now to answer any questions and see and get your recommendation to city council. Certainly if you aren't supportive of this acquisition, we could go back to city council and let them know, and there could be some action taken. If they agree with you, they can certainly move forward with the purchase as well. If you recall, this house was seen as very unique. There was a significant amount of community outreach. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, so it did seem to rise to a different level as far as homes go, and it was noted to be in very good condition. It definitely needs some work, including potentially foundation work. We do have an HSA that kind of outlines all that. So we do want to check in with you and to get a formal recommendation. Again, I think if you're supportive of the acquisition, you can make a motion and it could just be on record. I don't think we need to report back to city council. If for some reason you're not supportive of the acquisition, you have concerns about it because of fund balance and other things, we would present that to city council before the closing so they could potentially take action and take your recommendation to consideration. The resolution does require a financial risk analysis for these types of acquisitions. So we took that to mean certainly, what's the potential loss? We did get an appraisal of the property. It did come in at 1.25 million, so it's a bit below the 1.4 million. We're hoping that's a worst case scenario on resale. We did actually talk to that appraiser if they would do some analysis of value post landmark, taking into consideration the grants as well as the zoning incentives. They didn't feel like they could give us an estimated value, but they did write a letter saying they felt like those incentives could certainly help maintain or even increase value in their opinion. So they gave an opinion letter that was in the packet. So again, I think some of the council sentiment is even if they lose $100,000, couple $100,000, which we may or may not, depending on the resale, it was worth it to save a pretty unique property. So that was how they were seeing it. So we'll open it up for your discussion, deliberation, and recommendation to city council. I assume you all know kind of the historic social significance of the house. That was all in the staff memo. I wasn't going to go into that again since you've probably all seen it.
Yeah, that's great. So you don't have specific questions for staff?
Yeah, I've got one. Will the resale proceeds go completely back into the Historic Preservation Fund?
Yes.
If it's 1.516, then we benefit?
Yeah, even if it's more than what we bought it for, it would go back into the HPF.
Okay.
So I have just a couple of questions about like process related to this, especially having just sold a house in Louisville in a really weird market. What's the strategy for selling it at the other end of this? How are those choices being made? What's going to be considered an acceptable off? Like how does that navigated by the city?
Sure, yeah. So, if we, or when we put it out for sale, and we haven't fully figured that out yet, but I assume we'd engage with the realtor, we'd put it up for sale, we'd market it with the incentives at hand. And once we received an offer, the process is we'd probably go to city council. They have the ability to hold an executive session to consider any real estate deal. So they would look at the price and decide if they wanted to accept that price or not. I think we could certainly consider a process for HPC. It'd be good to get your input if you just want city council to consider that, or if you want to give them advice on that. I could check with the city attorney and see if you could weigh in on that transaction as well. But otherwise, I think it would be it would be an executive session with city council, so it wouldn't be open to the public. They could basically give direction to staff to come back with a contract for that purchase price. So we might go back and forth a few times. We might have competing offers, I don't know how, in this market, how it'll come out, but be something in that order.
How hopeful are you for us?
I think I don't know.
I can weigh in a little bit on this too, since I also just sold a house in this market. And it's not the market it was a couple of years ago when this house was purchased at a higher price than it is now that we're looking at buying it. I'm pretty confident that the house I just sold would have sold for considerably more than I just sold it for, had it been that same market. So I'm looking at this going, all right, so we're giving a little bit of appreciation, it looks like, to what they bought at and what we're willing to pay. I just want to go into this with eyes wide open, that looking at possibly costing couple $100,000, I think is a very optimistic point of view on what this could turn out to be an encumbrance on our HPF money. As you said, it's unusual that it went to council first and they've already made their decision before we got a chance to weigh in on it. So at this point, that's neither here nor there, but it is something that I think we need to look at with the taxpayers' money that's into our fund. Financial analysis wise, you're going to have a commission, which is going to be on over $1 million, hopefully, 5%. So there's 50 grand right there. And then if someone's looking at it and saying, well, there's substantial foundation work and this and all the other things going on, I'm not going to speculate on what the sale price could be, but it's just something that we need to make sure that everybody understands, that we are saying we're willing to encumber multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars on this project. I think the project itself would be great. I would definitely want to save that house. It's exactly the type of house we want. So I'm okay with it as long as everybody's going, tough time to do this. It's a great time to help out the owners who bought the house and decided they didn't want to use it in the purpose that it looks like it's best intended to be used. So it's great to move it on to somebody else that hopefully will, but it's just, are we accepting that it could be $300,000, $400,000
And time.
and years before we see it, till the market turns a little more. So, but
Yeah.
Has the city gotten any feedback from local realtors on what a landmarked property value?
So our appraiser reached out to a realtor and felt like, it was just a one contact with our appraiser with one realtor. And again, they were optimistic, I would say. They provided us we didn't ask them for anything other than their honest opinion, and they were optimistic. So again, I don't know if they're taking into account market conditions or anything like that. So I think this is a bit of an experiment for us. And maybe we're caught in a particular market downturn. I think in Louisville with residential property values, when we've seen downturns, they've been very, very small compared to regional downturns. And, things still move in Louisville, even though maybe they don't move in 3 days, maybe it takes 3 months, but I don't know, you may have very individual experiences. But we didn't do that research to find like what the average length of time to turn over a house in Louisville is now compared to a couple years ago. I don't
It's a
know.
little wild, like just full disclosure. So like on my street, there were 4 houses that were listed and that street behind me had 2. And of all of those listings, 1 has sold, mine. None of the others have. They've been either taken off the market, put up for rent. Like that's just, it's really just bad timing. So it's just, I'm generally supportive of the concept as well. It's just, it's a big roll of the dice in terms of
Is
what
the-
will actually recover.
Yeah. Is there a renter in the property right now? Because it,
I believe it's been used as a
right.
Airbnb.
And so as
It's-
far as selling it and have it, because at least would we be a landlord? Would the city be a
So
landlord?
the
for a little
renter,
bit?
so the
a great
yeah, the
question.
renter's moving out, and so that was part of the contract is they were going to have to move out by September 1st in any case. They have actually the renter has purchased property elsewhere in
Okay.
Louisville.
Okay, because I was thinking that could be not a bad thing if we had revenue, like someone's living in it, but then we're also a
I
landlord.
don't think we
so-
want to become landlords.
No, I don't want to become landlords, but that could give us a little more time. But anyway, that was my question was how do we handle renters in the property? And then as far as a real estate agent, will the city just like take bids or like how do they find?
So we haven't really got into that yet. I think we'll have to determine our process, but I
Right.
think it's in our best interest still to use a realtor,
Right.
even with the commission, unless we, if we're lucky, maybe someone will be interested in it and we can avoid the realtor fees, but we don't, that might be we'd be really, really lucky if that happened.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, just in speaking with a realtor somewhat recently too, I was told that if it's an exceptional property or location or just a gem in some way, shape, or form, that they go rather quickly. If they're more of a standard set, they've been sitting for quite a while.
Yeah.
I don't know where this one fits in.
So this one is on Main Street, right?
there's
Right
some
near the middle
benefits.
school. A lot of people have mentioned that when they've talked about it. We really rely on the zoning incentives. I think when somebody's coming in and wanting to do a building addition on a historic home, I think having that extra lot coverage and floor area has to add significant value to if you were going to scrape and rebuild as far as just per square foot value, I would hope, because the majority, the vast majority of that home could be brand new behind the historic home.
Yep.
So I know there's, it's going to look a little different. It might even look better, but, I don't know what percentage. I could, that'd actually be interesting if you take a small historic home like this, tear off the sunroom off the back, because that's not necessarily historic, and you maximize your floor area and lot coverage, I mean, 70, 80% of that home may be brand new
Right.
floor area. So that on Main Street, just a couple blocks out of downtown. So I think if you think about it that way, we might have a really good shot at having a high-value property here still.
Right.
I wonder if even just taking some of that advanced math on a property like this, trying to get, obviously having the landmark on the original structure, if some of that math were available to somebody and not have to go through the brain damage of doing it themselves, if that would incentivize somebody to purchase it quicker.
So my instinct is that it's going to be important for us to have a voice in the strategy because it's like we're investing our money in this. And so I think things like that, prepping a sales package that's rather extraordinary, that really makes everything transparent, is going to be important in strategizing like very thoughtfully.
Yeah. And I think as far as the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we may spend on this, I mean, I think the community and location and all that stuff have kind of shown that this might be an exceptional house. So, and I guess that's what we have to kind of decide is like, is this a property that we're willing to take a risk on and possibly spend or lose or whatever money up front and then possibly also end up
The back
spending
end.
money as far as the grant and everything.
Yeah,
So,
hopefully,
right.
if we do it,
right.
then they come back, the next owners come back and say, all right, now we
Unless
want
they wait 36 months and they don't have to
300,000
pay for
more
it.
for.
But, so yeah, so I mean, that's really the, kind of the bottom line is like, is this a property that, that seems like it is worth it? And I think like, and I appreciate staff including all the letters in the city council meeting and in ours, because it does show like, I mean, we had probably the most feedback from this property that I've seen. And so I think that just the location, prominence, like all those things says a lot about the house itself. So, but we have to make sure that we want to spend the money on it too and take the risk. And one thing too, I think we've talked about this possibility for a long time of like, what would it be like to acquire a property? And this one probably seems least risky compared to some other properties that could potentially have come before us, like a commercial property or, so I think that's one thing to think about too, is it's definitely low risk relative to some commercial properties that could have come to us. But, and so in some ways it's a good trial, but definitely not the best real estate environment for the experiment.
I think it's high gain. It's high gain for this risk, given the location.
Yeah.
You know, across from the Historic Museum, right there, right at the entrance, the north, entrance into the city. So those are, speak to the willingness to maybe take this risk. I'm also trying to think through, like, if we were to not approve this, I'm not sure what, and offer alternatives, but the alternative might be just we don't purchase it. The existing homeowner does not want to live in this property and sounds like wants to do a renovation, wants to stay in Louisville. They would probably sell it. A new owner would either live in it like it is, and that'd be great, not landmarked or landmarked someday, or they might come in front of us again to change it. So I'm just trying to think
Or they
through all
might just
these.
squeeze it.
Or they might come in front of us to demo it.
I mean, the current owner could demo it after.
The current owner could demo it too, correct,
Pretty quickly.
pretty quickly.
So,
And that probably would be the thing that happens of all those options.
Right.
So, knowing that that's probably likely, also knowing this is a risk, I'm more in favor of taking the risk, given the community support for this house and given the location.
The amount that we're on the hook for right now is just the 5,000 earnest money. There's really no other substantial money that the city would lose if we back out of the contract.
That's my understanding, yes.
So just so we're aware of that, if we were to convince council this is a bad idea, which I'm not saying is a bad idea, but if that's where we went, we would be out 5,000 for trying to save it somehow, which I would be fine with that if that's where it came to. Hopefully it doesn't. Thing that's more on my mind is this setting precedents that we then are going to be obliged to follow for any other homes that someone had bought and then decided, I'll take my time, and when I show that I couldn't do it,
You know, it doesn't have to set precedents at all. Like, again, this home seemed exceptional in that it was on the National
Right.
Register of Historic Places and was going to get demolished. I don't know that we've ever seen that before. And the amount of community feedback we got, you know, in support of trying to save this, I think in my almost 10 years at the city, this is the most public feedback I've seen on any project. So, you know, if that's a 10-year occurrence, I don't think it's going to set a precedent. I don't think we'll see it that often.
No.
I think there's things like that to take into consideration, the national registry portion, the community outcry a little bit, or at least opinion that seemed to come across. I also kind of wonder if we could get some legs under this as far as it's an unusual item. So just getting it out there that there is a historic preservation commission, there is this chance to landmark. I mean, could there be some other items where we angle to get, you know, a few write-ups of just trying to get knowledge of the program out there too? So it's, if we did end up not, you know, losing some money or something out of that, it's almost like awareness
PR.
and other items that you're gaining out of it as well. So that eases it a little bit for me. It still makes me uncomfortable because I don't think we'll end up on the right side of the 1.4, but I could be surprised. But I think items like considering the marketing or the knowledge portion out to the community, and if we could do other items that we could do internally that help kind of lay out the parameters of what you could do with that while keeping the main structure there, I think that could be something that you could ride that wave for a little while too. I do say this is 37% of what we have for a budget going into this one entity for a while. And now obviously we'll get a portion of that back, but
We don't know when.
eventually.
we don't know when. I mean, we have enough in there, I feel right now, that it 2 years ago would have been viable, probably not, or 3-4 years ago, but we're in a unique situation right now.
Yeah, I have no concerns that it will sell. It's just
Right,
at what
just a
price
matter of time.
and how quickly.
Yeah.
But we're not going to lose there's no way we're losing all those funds.
We could have our meetings in it until it sells. Right? Does anyone feel strongly about not supporting it? I mean, obviously, we all have a little bit of reservation, but no one feels strongly like, I do not support this. Okay.
Nope.
All right, so we'll, someone want to make a motion so we can put it to a vote for the record? Is that right?
Yeah, we'll want a motion.
Make a motion to approve the acquisition of 1016 Main Street.
I'll second that motion.
We'll do a roll call, please.
All right, Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilt,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Beauchamp.
Yes.
This will be fun.
Experiment.
Yep, experiment.
Here we go.
That's a fun project for you to come in on too.
Yeah.
Like, welcome to our first.
I think that would be very.
Our next item is our work plan.
Nice. All right.
All right, so the first item is the grant program update, which is primarily staff item. And we are on track for this, I believe, for Q3, Q4. And then I'll go into the subcommittees as well. I know a few of you emailed me today with your updates. So if we could keep it high level for the rest of the commission, that'd be great. And then I'll get back to you with your requests later this week. So the first one is the online map for landmark properties, and that subcommittee is Josh and Linda.
Just working through it right now, probably halfway through it.
Awesome, okay. The Old Town Walking Tour subcommittee, Sloan and Linda.
My update's not any different than it was last month, which is that I had a sit-down conversation with Gigi Yang from the Historical Museum, and I think the plan is to piggyback on their use of Bloomberg Connects for tours and also their Viewfinder walking tours. So we can talk more.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the updated brochure flyer, and that subcommittee is Sloan and Marty.
Yeah, so Sloan and I got together, went through all of the marketing material, talked about what we want to achieve. We're going to present some ideas to the rest of the commissioners and get their feedback. And Jess is going to get back to us on what city staff can do as far as pulling some of that together for us.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one is events, and that subcommittee is Chrissy and Talbot. And we do have a event coming up this Saturday, which is the Farmers Market. And I'll let you chime in if there's anything else you want to add.
It's our, the third and final scheduled outreach event that we're doing this Saturday at the Farmers Market. We have some new materials that Jess worked to put together, some coasters with some images of historic structures. I think that's, I don't know if you have
And
anything
you
to
got all the
add.
volunteers you needed?
I think we do, because thank
Right.
you, signed up to volunteer.
You're doing afternoon? Yeah.
Yep, and then Jess will be there in the morning, so thank you. Yeah. So.
Do it. We'll do
Great,
it.
thank you.
Well, I do have one other thing. I just wanted to say that I dropped the ball a little bit on some of the other contacts that I had made, and I just got super busy and everything, but I'm still keeping those on our agenda because now is a good time for us to start really talking more for next year. So
Totally,
it's
that's
not
great.
the other events like
Yeah.
are forgotten about.
No, and I think these were great, so.
That's it for us.
All right, then staff updates.
All right, so there was an alteration certificate approved at 1045 Front Street, and this was for a fence and a new ADU. And then in terms of other items, there were 2 demo reviews that went to subcommittee this past month, and they were both referred to the full commission for review. And since there's already such a full agenda for the September 15th meeting, the proposal is to have a special meeting on September 8th, and that would be virtual. If you're unable to make that meeting, please let me know. You can let me know by email later this week, and we can look at another date. But it would be ideal to have it around that time as the first property listed there, 813 Main. Their demo, their 60-day timeline consideration would expire within the same week of our regular scheduled meeting. So that's the reason for choosing September 8th. And then at the last meeting in July, I had said I would get back to you on a historic marker policy update. And I chatted with Gigi from the museum about your questions, and she's going to come herself in October and give a presentation with more information and answer your questions. And then the next meeting will be on Monday, September 15th at 6:30. And I'll pass it off to you for any commission member updates.
Would the special meeting be at 6:30 virtually?
Yeah, it could be an alternative time if you prefer, but I thought it might be good to keep it at the regular time.
Okay, so when you're looking at your schedules, just if there's a time different than 6:30, let her know. But otherwise, we'll just kind of assume that it's 6:30. But if that time slot doesn't work for some reason,
Works for me.
6:30 works for me too that day.
me too.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
there you
great.
go.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, any updates from commissioners? Nope. All right. And then that was our last item.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, have a great night. Thank you.